And, okay.
Okay. Hello, friends. My name is Dion Lerner. I am a nonviolence direct action trainer. I've been working here in Philadelphia for most of the last 40 years doing this kind of work. Let me start by explaining a little bit about what nonviolent direct action is. Nonviolence is not about pacifism. It has very little to do with any religion or any set of beliefs, and those of us who do this work don't expect anybody to have a commitment to nonviolence beyond what the action is. But what nonviolence is about acting against violence. And violence is at the center of all of the methods of oppression and injustice, whether we're talking about racism, sexism, classism. They are maintained by the threat of violence and administered either by the state through the police and military or through that work of so-called true believers who take it into their own hands. And also by the societal structures that mirror this institutional violence. And so when we act against violence, what we are doing is we are standing up against not just the action of violence, but the institution of violence and the institutionalization of violence in our society. That's why it's revolutionary. And in direct action, what we're doing is we as individuals are taking responsibility for our actions and taking charge of our power and putting it in contrast to the injustice and the oppressive structures of our society. And we do that directly by taking it to the streets, by taking it to the people who are responsible for those power structures. And so nonviolent direct action is an extremely strong, powerful statement that is all about acting as whole people to reject injustice and oppression of all forms. This training that we're going to run through very quickly here today is usually directed at peacekeepers, that is, people who are responsible for maintaining the direction and unity of demonstrations. In this situation, you're not actually going to be doing that, but many of the techniques that we use for training peacekeepers are pretty relevant because they're really about how you work with a crowd and how you maintain unity and safety within a group situation. And that's briefly what we're going to talk about today. Some of the slides will be more relevant to that. I'll be kind of freewheeling as I go. So this, by the way, is going to be offered as a training every morning during the convention period. The schedule has not yet been set, but you can contact the organizers and they can tell you all about it. So for the actual training, we'll be doing an introduction, talking about what our roles are, going over event overview and logistics, and then the training itself is mostly a series of exercises that we do, role-playing and other kinds of things that help us experience some of the issues and responses so that we can learn what works and maybe what doesn't work and get some practice before we're actually out on the street. The whole thing is very experiential with lots of questions and all that. It's actually a lot of fun. And I would encourage you to come to that training because this video can't begin to do that. And I'm not even going to begin to try to describe the exercises that we're going to do. So all I'm going to do is narrate some of these slides very quickly. Basically what we want to do is, the mindset we want to have is to remember that people come to the demonstration because they want to do something. They want to say something. And then they get there and there's not a whole lot to do except stand around in the hot sun and listen to speeches. And that's why people get alienated, frustrated, and may start to either drift away or act out. And so one of the key things that we need to do is keep people engaged. And we want to do that in a way that's going to be positive and that's going to realize the plan of action for the day, for what we want to be doing. One of the things that's really important is to provide communication so that people know what's going on. Uncertainty creates fear, which can create really negative problems. And so constant communication to people, what's going on. If you're on a march, why is the march stopped? When is it starting? Where is it going? Why are we crossing the street? All, just constantly reinforcing what's happening so that people feel like they're part of it and not just like they're being led around by wringing their nose. It's very important to protect the safety of all people, and that includes children, less able people that may be there, other folks who just maybe aren't quite as committed as you might be. We got to remember that it's everybody's action. And what we really want to do is to maximize our effectiveness. So we really need to be focused on what our goal is, what our message is, and really try to minimize other distractions and make sure that what message gets communicated to the public in the media is the message that we want, and not that something happened or that there was an arrest or something else. We want the message to be focused on the positive, not on the negative aspects. So usually we train peacekeepers in a number of different areas. There's a lot of work that's about how to move people, so how you start marches and do things like that. A lot of the training is in giving aid, on particularly communication skills, listening skills, and also in how to act to ensure safety. And we'll talk some more about interventions. Basically, though, peacekeepers are trained to build solidarity and common purpose, help people to remember why we're there, which is to deliver a common message, not to get sidetracked into sectarian issues. And my basic philosophy is to serve the people gladly. Keep that song in your heart and a smile on your lips, and trust me, it's a lot easier. You'll be a lot happier, and so will the people who you have to deal with. George Lakey and Peter Woodrow, who are two people who've been very important in the history of peacekeeping training, were in charge of peacekeepers for the first free elections in South Africa in the early 90s. And they developed this concept of peacekeeping being about being helpers. And so it's about, first of all, handling your fear, about enlisting your allies, about listening and observing, about projecting confidence, and about recalling and creating nonviolent options. And those nonviolent options, those are the things that we actually learned during the exercises that we're not going to talk about here, so that's why you want to come to the training, so you actually learn something. So fear is the biggest single problem, because fear is the barrier that prevents people from acting. And Gandhi talked a lot about this, and he said that you don't deny your fear. Everybody's scared. I'm scared all the time. Every time I've got to confront a cop in riot gear, or an armed Klansman, or a belligerent counter-demonstrator, I'm not happy. I don't really want to do it. I'm not a big guy. I'm not that kind of person. But what you have to do is what Gandhi talked about, of casting off fear. Realizing that, yeah, you're scared, but there's something that's more important than your fear, which is why you came here in the first place. That you are committed to an idea, to a mission, and that you're going to do that in spite of your fear. Now, at this point in the training, we'd be doing some exercises to actually help you do that. And the most important of which is we'd be doing a brainstorm of all the things that you most fear. And that helps get those out. And it's also what we use to develop the situations that we do for the exercises in the training. So the training exercises are actually based on the things that you're most scared of, which makes it more useful. In terms of what people are doing in terms of peacekeeping, we talked about enlisting allies, and this is really important because no action I have ever been at or been involved with has enough people who are trained as peacekeepers. Never. It simply doesn't happen. And so what you have to do is you have to reach out for help from the people around you. And this works because people are there because they support the issue. They're there essentially for the same reason that you are. And they're there because they want to be helpful, because they want to move things forward. And so if you ask them to help, they're usually pretty cooperative. And so this is really essential because you're going to need people to do things. So yes, if you need someone to go send a message to the front of the line or the front of the stage, ask somebody to do it. Usually they'll be very helpful to it. If you need them somebody to accompany a media person, ask. You'll find someone who's willing. You don't have to do everything, and you can't do everything. And in some cases, you may need to stay where you are, whether it's because of responsibilities to whatever your task is, or to a family member, or whatever. So remember, you can always ask others. Now, the single most important thing you can do is help set the tone, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Providing information is the most essential role that peacekeepers and other people of goodwill have. And those are usually very simple questions. When does the march start? When do the speakers start? When do the speakers end? And most importantly, where are the bathrooms? The final thing is what most people think peacekeepers do, which is to prevent, minimize, and end conflict. And I tell you that if you set your tone, enlist your allies, provide your information, you're pretty much going to have prevented most conflicts right away. However, we'll be talking a little bit about how you do that, and those are the things that, again, that we teach you in the training. So I talked about tone, and tone is really the single most important thing. It's how you project, what attitude you have. If you're uptight and authoritarian and macho, people don't really like that, and they're not going to like you. And it's going to set a very negative and aggressive tone. If, on the other hand, you're open and friendly and helpful and asking questions and having a sense of humor, that goes over a lot better with people. And again, we'd be doing some exercises to teach you that. But basically, a lot of it is about being open, friendly, respectful, reassuring, assertive, and most of all, calm. And the single most important technique you're going to have is listening to other people. Asking questions and listening, not arguing. Peacekeepers and people of peace model desired behaviors. Other people will reflect those behaviors, so it's really important that we project positive images, positive actions consistently. I said information is really important, not only knowing where the bathrooms are, but which ones are the least skanky. Always good to scout them out. In Philadelphia, it's going to be really important to monitor water, to know where people can get water, and to be aware of people who need water. If you see people who are sweating profusely and very red, or even worse, if they've stopped sweating and are ashy gray, those people need water and shade immediately. Find somebody to get them there immediately, because heat stress and heat stroke can be very serious. They can even be fatal, and it's going to be hot. So pay attention to your fellows and make sure they're properly hydrated. It will be important to be aware of where people can get medical aid, whether it's a cut or a heat stress, or they trip over a curb and break an ankle. That information is really, you need to know where they go. Of course, if there is a serious injury or something life-threatening, you simply call 911. That is the most, and you do that before you do anything else. Call 911. You should be aware of what options there are for media people. You, of course, are perfectly welcome to talk to any media about anything that crosses your mind, but you should be aware there are also official spokespeople, and there will probably be media tents and things like that, and you should be aware of where those resources are so that you can direct people to them. And finally, you should have a general awareness of what the program is so that you can help people figure out what's going on when, especially if there are featured speakers or entertainers that people have come to hear. That's the main reason, unfortunately, why a lot of people come to demonstrations. So, I'm not going to go through this material in detail because it's what we cover in the actual training. But what's really important in preventing, minimizing, and ending conflict is to be constantly observing what's going on and acting when you see something starting to develop. Even if it's only a heated conversation between two people, what you want to do is walk up and say, "Hi, I'm Dion. What are you guys talking about? Gee, that's interesting," and get them into a conversation. You always want to intervene and not simply step back and watch. It's also important to intercept groups so that groups don't come into conflict with each other directly. If you can, you always want to try to stop groups from and provide a space between them. And finally, individuals who are acting out can be isolated to prevent them from being seen as part of our demonstration. All of these things are techniques that we teach you in the training. In the post-Dallas atmosphere, I think it's also important to say something about panic, because panic is a very specific problem that occurs when people feel threatened, especially life-threatened. Secondly, when they don't see an easy escape. And third, when there's no leadership. And so panic is actually very easy to prevent. It means you have to take leadership. You have to overcome your fear, provide leadership, and direct people to safety. And there will be a safe, in most cases anyway, a safe route. For instance, if the police are using gas to clear an area, they leave an exit so that you can clear the area. But what people need to know is how to get there. So, provide leadership, cast off your fear, direct people to safe harbor. Basic guidelines for most nonviolent demonstrations are pretty standard. I haven't made these up. And the most important is absolutely no violence. We are acting against violence. So we don't want to perpetrate violence, not only physically, but verbally. I don't think there is a place for fuck the pig chants, or kill the pigs, or roast the bacon. I don't think that that is really appropriate. That is not nonviolent. If we want them to have a nonviolent response, we need to model nonviolent responses ourselves. There is, of course, no property damage either. It's also important, if you're working in a peacekeeping capacity, not to get arrested, because your responsibility is to the rest of the demonstration. If you end up spending the next several hours in a police van or a school bus or a station house, and you're wondering, gee, what happened to that kid or that older woman I was talking to? That means you're not doing your job. Another guideline is not to run. This sounds kind of odd, but running causes anxiety and can cause people to imitate it and can then cause real problems. So don't run. If you need to get someplace quickly, skip. You may look silly and people may laugh at you, but they're not going to panic. Obviously, no weapons of any kind. I will tell you, the police have construed Swiss Army knives as weapons, so just leave it all at home. Do not consume drugs or alcohol before or during an action. It may be tempting if somebody next to you hands you a joint, just smile and pass it along. We need to act collectively, which means as a group, we want to act together and to ensure the core principles and values of our action and to ensure our mutual safety. It's also important to act cooperatively within the larger context of this demonstration, of the days of the day, and in fact of the entire week of action. We all come from different places and different political spaces and may feel differently about different elements of the agenda or some of the leadership or some of the speakers, and may not agree with everything and everybody and every decision. But on the course of the day, that's what's happening. The point to argue, to second guess, to evaluate is during the evaluation afterwards. During the day, let's try to act together, and especially to respond to any instructions that we do get from March leadership. They are looking at the overview and at the safety of everybody, and it's really important to not allow confusion and chaos to break down our unity. And again, I'm going to end by just saying, serve the people gladly. Thank you, friends. Look forward to seeing you.